Our next speaker is Aaron McDonald, who is the Manager of Product Propositions for Gen.I. So Aaron's going to take us through some of the tricky stuff, so how to maximise your existing investment as you move towards a BYOD program, and also HR and legal issues. So please welcome Aaron McDonald.
G'day guys. So yeah, as mentioned, we're going to talk about some of the more kind of practical steps that we can help you with as Gen.I to go through this process of evaluating and understanding where you are, where you want to be, and how you want to move forward with it. And a few little things that we've picked up along the way in terms of our own experience internally or dealing with customers through this process. So I think we've talked today quite a bit about this concept of bringing the three big things that are impacting consumerization together. Mobility, cloud services, and social media are the kind of underlying forces that are really converging to take our users on that experience forward in a way that means that they want to work this way, or they want to consume IT from us in a different way. Each one of those things has their own kind of pitfalls in terms of risks and opportunities in terms of creating a better working environment or a more collaborative experience with your customers, or lowering the cost to deliver IT services. The combination of those things is really where it's happening for an end user. They don't see the difference between those three things. They're kind of all part of that end user experience that they're desperately seeking. And so what we're looking at is how can we safely, in terms of organisationally, business process, cost, security, manage a great user experience. That's what you're trying to deliver at the end to satisfy that need that's been driven by the way that they consume services, their own personal life. And so if you look at security in there, we need to look at how we control the information, how we control the devices, how we manage the policies around those things, what types of applications we're going to support in that context. And I think if you look beyond the bring your own computing example and expand that out to what we're talking around in the modern workspace, it can become a little bit more complex. And I think the device or discussion around bring your own device is one component of where this is headed. Like Neil mentioned earlier, it's kind of the beginning of that journey. But if you look outside of that and what we've done with the modern workspace, it can actually touch pretty much every part of IT, not just the device. And so getting the context around these things outside of just the device is really important too, and it opens up a number of different discussions in terms of how do you manage things. I think one thing that's really important, I think all the guys here have talked about it today, has been that it's important for us to front foot this and to get onto it proactively and control the pace of change. So if you're not doing this, it's going to be done to you. And if it's done to you, it's probably not going to be done in the optimal way. And so I think if you've got any inclination in terms of this welling up inside your organisations, then I'd be very surprised not to see it. It's important to get onto this early, and that's a lesson that we've learnt through this process ourselves and through talking with customers, that if you control the pace of change and IT is taking solutions to the organisation, then you have a better ability to affect the outcome and the way that users consume these services. When we're looking at policy, and I think that's an important thing that the Citrus guys talked about, is it really starts with that, because a lot of people jump to technology and they look at, how can we put device management on a smartphone, or how can we change our firewall setups, or how can we deliver applications virtually. And I think all of those things are really important, but it starts after the policy. And we've got kind of 4 areas where policy can hit, and there isn't one size fits all, is what we've learned through this process. It's going to depend on the user group, especially in large organisations. You have different groups of users who may require a different policy. And an example of that might be, for example, you might feel that social media is having a big impact on the time people are spending on the internet and not working in the organisation. But your marketing team will say, well, I'm using that as a business tool because that's important to me to do my job. But it might not be appropriate for someone who's a contact centre agent, or it might be. That's the way they engage with their customers. So I think there's no one size fits all, even within an organisation. And a really important thing is to try and understand your users within that organisation in the context of policy, and so that you can come up with appropriate policies that align to users. And when you look outside the device, again, that's a bigger conversation. It does take a bit of time to work through, and it is probably the hardest thing to do. So if you've got your users kind of understood well, and you can kind of group them in these areas of policy, when you move forward from there, you can look at how do you implement that policy using technology. And there are a number of different areas where you might take different approaches. So if there's a contain, for example, it might be that you only allow access to these services from within a controlled environment. So therefore your security system has to be context aware, has to know that if users are coming from this location or this type of connectivity, then it's safe to allow access to those things. If they're not coming from this location or this type of infrastructure, say a more open connection on the internet, it's not safe to allow them access to that information. There might be areas that allow you to embrace bring your own device and the modern workspace a lot more easily through implementing technologies such as Citrix, where you can take some of the boundaries out around security and policy and kind of trust that the application itself is secure. In terms of Facebook, the example before, you might need to get even a level of detail below that. You know, we'll allow users to access Facebook, but we won't allow them to play Farmville on Facebook. And there are solutions that can help with that down to that level of detail. And so really getting clear on the policy, and then in a context of not just bring your own device, but in the context of enabling a consumerization-driven end-user experience across your IT applications, gets you into a discussion where you can look at how can we use technology to give those users that different outcome. Some of the things that we've come across in terms of policies in New Zealand, for example, is fringe benefit tax. It's really important to understand the implications on that, both in the hardware purchasing, but also in the consumed services after that. For example, if you've got an employee-owned device and you then put a company-owned SIM card in it, what is the implication of that? You know, is that then a benefit that should be taxable? Is your mobile bill going to be something that's going to be subject to the taxman's scrutiny? You know, do you have a policy that can help mitigate some of that risk in terms of if they do start, the government does start to take a closer eye on those kind of things as it becomes more prevalent. And so looking at the tax implications has been a really big thing that we've worked through with a number of customers. And policy side of things is really important as well, in terms of if they're accessing the internet via your network, but on their own device and consuming services off the internet that might be subject to copyright infringement protection and those kinds of things. So how do you control that from an IT perspective, or how do you manage it from a policy perspective so that your risk is mitigated? All of those kind of factors are quite important when you're looking at this more holistically outside of the technology. As we've talked about today, there's kind of three ways that we can approach the secure part of the end user experience that you're trying to deliver, and each one of those is going to be appropriate for different situations. So where we kind of start would be looking at the infrastructure layer. You know, where is it appropriate to have a secure connectivity environment, and what type of security is appropriate for that type of user or that type of service. And that could be a VPN or a WAN service or something of that nature. We've got plenty of solutions to help in that space. The next area would be looking at devices. So how can we enable devices to be trusted or to access content or applications or services? And that could be through policies, or it could be through locking down those devices. It could be security software, like the Citrix guys said, they mandate the use of antivirus software on personal devices, those kinds of things. Important to cover off all those bases. And then the last part is kind of trusting the application, and there are various ways that you can do that. You can containerize it like the guys have done with Citrix, or we could look at things like what Cisco do, for example, is they only allow access to Salesforce, which is a cloud-based application, via the Cisco authenticated VPN. So Salesforce is aware of where the connection is coming from, and if it doesn't come via Cisco, they don't allow access to it. So there's a number of different ways to approach that. We've talked a little bit about this today in terms of delivering business value, and I think it's important to really identify that up front and early where the business value is going to be driven. Is it simply that you're going to have a better user experience? Is it going to be that you've got a cost out opportunity in terms of hardware and software? Is it going to be that you're going to enable more productivity so your employees get more time to do the things that they need to do? Are you going to be able to attract better talent pools? Really important to try and identify those things up front, but there's a number of different areas where taking a modern workspace approach can help actually deliver real business value. I think Cisco, for example, believe that their policy saves their employees 30 minutes a day, and if you times that by the labour rate, it's a reasonable amount of money. But there's the negative side to that as well. You've got to look at, say, if all of your software and hardware was bring your own device, would that lower your purchasing ability with vendors, for example? You know, does that, if the bill's being paid for on the mobile side by the consumer, well, the ones that you're funding internally yourself, will you get a better rate or a lower rate or a higher rate, depending on the way that the corporate views your purchasing power now that you've farmed out some of that cost to the end users? So really important to do the math up front and understand the cost implications throughout it. The approach we take internally is a business outcomes-based approach. So we'll look to sit down and work with you on exploring your current environment, getting really familiar with your users and your business needs and your strategy. Look at expanding on that. So what are the opportunities that we can look at to improve productivity, understand the impacts of those potential changes. Then we would kind of envision with you, how do you want to be in the future? How can we take you forward? What would the ideal user experience look like for you? And how would we get you there? And then enable you. And then that's when we bring in the people or the process or the technologies to support that outcome that we've envisioned together. And it's a staged program. You can go through our process with our sales specialists, and they can take you at right detailed levels in the infrastructure and the business process to help you map your way through that journey. And if you really want to come and see how it could all work and what that envisioned state could look like in the future, and if you haven't already, I really encourage you to, is to come into the Modern Workspace Innovation Centre. We've got a lot of these technologies set up already. It's a user-friendly, interactive session where you get to touch the technology, see how it works, run through some business scenarios, and figure out how it could apply in your organisation. We've got lots of our partners in the room there with their technology enabling the solutions, including Citrix, so you can see how that really works in the real world. So if you're not booked in already, I really encourage you to get in there, do that, and see how it could enable a better outcome in a more modern workspace in your organisation. Thank you.
Actually, you can stay here, mate. I'll stay here. Awesome, thanks, Aaron. Fabulous. Right, the sort of final phase of our session is the panel, the Q&A panel. I'm going to start with the first question, which is actually to you, Neil. You gave a statistic around the ratio of mobile apps to PC apps being in 3 years 4:1, and the web user said, "Hey, it's a really compelling statistic. Do you have a source? Because I want to reuse that."
Right. So no, I didn't make it up. The source was Gartner. I think was the analyst about 12 months ago. They came out with a forecast around that. So yeah, if you search online, you can probably find that source, and if you can't find it, contact us and we'll provide you the link, and if you're a Gartner user, you can pick up that report.
Great, fabulous, thank you. Now we've got microphones coming around, by the way, guys, so just don't be shy, pop your hand up if you want to ask a question. So while you're thinking hard, I've got another one here. I guess this is probably to you, Aaron. FBT implications, are there any in New Zealand for paying the stipend?
Yeah, there would be. Yep. So it's important to work through that.
Yeah, cool. So I can just add to that how we, the reason we put it through payroll, so then it's taxed at your prevailing tax rate. So we got around the FBT component by putting it in your income tax. Now, whether that works in New Zealand, I wouldn't know, but that's exactly how we're doing it in New Zealand. So,
great.
So I assume, so that's where the HR component, when I talked about blowing out time-wise.
Yep.
There's a lot of countries that we need to deal with to make sure that we had that nailed. So we believe that we've covered it that way.
Fabulous. Question from the front here.
Yeah, the question.
Yep, you're all good.
The question I have is, there's a lot of discussion about policy here, but very little about a risk assessment before the policy is set in place. Because I suspect 95% of us here in this room already have BYODs, because unless you're banning USB sticks, you've already got BYODs in your organisation. So it seems to me that we've jumped ahead to some more complex technology, and there's no real risk assessment about the organisation's data, its IP, and how you deal with it across the organisation. Comments?
I think that's the purpose of that 4-step process. The first phase of that is to really understand that current situation and do the situation analysis on terms of users and technology inside your organisation. Start from that point of getting a good understanding of what is actually happening in my network, who is connecting it from where, what types of applications are they accessing on the network or via the network, and really understand that up first. And that's the first step on that journey. So we really encourage that step.
Yeah, and that also is kind of extended to data and risk classification, obviously, not just down to an application layer, but potentially data within an application, and where you look to surface some information through a trusted web front end, for example, and other information you need to get while on the LAN and on a trusted device.
Cool. Any questions from the floor? No? I've got one here, which was, hey, we've talked a lot about the user experience. Is there anything about customer experience? So we're talking about, the end customer. Has BYOD enabled any more meaningful customer interaction for business that we've seen? Any evidence around that kind of thing?
Well, I've got some personal evidence. So we've got Victoria Sushi and Subway just across the way there that I can go to either to have my lunch. Now, the fact that I've got an Android device and I can pre-order my Subway and go down and pick it up without waiting in a queue means that I am more likely, I'll probably go to Subway 8 times out of 10. Sorry, Victoria Sushi. But so, I mean, that really drives my purchasing behaviour, and I think there's great examples of things people can do to do that.
Cool.
And I think in our sales force, some of you probably would have experienced our guys taking out an iPad, for example, and going through a proposal or a quote or something like that on an iPad device, and that's not company supplied. So they've done that themselves. They've purchased that, or it's come through as a prize or something like that for selling something. But they've taken their initiative and gone out there and done that with you. It's not something that Telecom formally supplies to our people as a tool of trade. So yeah.
Likewise, from a sort of personal observation experience, I had some tradesmen come and do some work for us, and they come to repair something, and the tradesperson arrived, and he see this very complicated hot water setup that he'd never seen before. So he pulled his iPhone out, took a photograph of it, and texted it to the guy who set it up. And they were able to solve the problem, if you're like, oh, that bit does this and that bit does that, without having to wait to make another appointment or someone else to come out. So, I just stood back and thought, well, yeah, he obviously bought that device, used it himself, and it solved the problem for me, and it was efficient for them. So, yeah, there's lots of little examples like that, I think, that are a bit soft as a measurement point, but that do provide benefit.
I think the easiest way to look at that is, would you want to be interacted with in the way that you like to interact yourself? You use these technologies in your own personal life every day, and so if someone's interacting with you in that way, that would feel more familiar and more compelling to you. So, like Neil said, the hard facts are probably hard to justify at this point, but there are some kind of obvious light bulb moments that you can pick up from just your own personal experience and how that would reflect.
Yeah, I guess from our company's perspective, we're investing a huge amount of money in delivering on the banner is mobile work styles, but really taking some of the core infrastructure that we have and being able to optimize that for delivery onto mobile devices. So if you look at the latest version of Zen app, there's a mobility pack associated with it, which really means taking the device that somebody has and really exposing what that device can do to your back-end application. So as an example, making use of the GPS chip or the camera or compass or whatever it needs to be that's on that device, and figuring out how you can embed that back in without having to rewrite the client application each time. So using Receiver to make use of all of those different facets. And for us, that's massive. We know that the mobile world is exploding, or has exploded, but is going to continue to ramp up. And being able to enable, whether it's a courier or whether it's the electricity board that needs to do their repairs, and there's many case studies around how those types of organisation are building their mobile fleet out and delivering applications that way to be able to enable the mobile workforce, so that you don't have to go back to a bricks and mortar office to update everything each time.
Right. Any more questions from the floor at this stage? No. Don't be shy now. Don't be shy. Here's one that's just coming from a web user. Hey, so do Genii, build on what you were saying before, actually, Aaron, but it's probably a question to the Genii people here. So, do Genii already use a BYOD strategy internally? And if so, how many adopted it? So this is rubber hits the road moment. How do we do it internally?
Well, look, so we've been allowing email, for example, on smartphone devices and web mail access for as long as I've been here. And we've got a number of web portals, and we've got Salesforce.com, for example, that we can use on any device. We have also got a pilot running with some of the executive and other people in the organisation on BYOD, and we're looking to roll that out further.
Great.
I can give you some stats for us as well, if that helps. So any employee within Citrix can access a desktop or their application on any device. So that's 100% if you want to put it that way. In terms of people that are officially in the program, that program doesn't stretch across the whole employee work user base. So there are some people that have a very low technology footprint, so think call center staff mainly, where they've got a terminal and a screen, and we don't want to pay them $2,100 because our actual cost right now is $300 or $400 or something. Then the other end of the scale is our technical support, research and development, those types of people where they have a large technology footprint, not really laptop based, so they don't fit into the program either. So if you take the middle part, which is probably about 50% of our organisation that could claim the money, about half of those are actually in the program and claiming the dollars to do it. But every single person within the organisation has and can have access to the corporate infrastructure from any device in any location.
Cool.
And just I guess to cover on that, I really like Cisco's example where they allowed their staff to say they wanted to do BYOD, and the first thing they did was check the service desk tickets for the IT help desk for that user and determine whether they were going to be able to support themselves. And if they decided they weren't, then sorry, you get your Windows 7 device that we know we can support remotely.
Right, nice.
So it's not necessarily going to be right for everyone. There's going to be some people who get definite benefits and some people who maybe can't handle it.
Nice. Hey, so we're almost at time, so I'm cognizant of that. So last question, which has come in from a web user, and it's to you, Stuart. Can Citrix share examples of financial service organisations or those handling personal credit card information doing BYOC, and how they manage any risk and regulatory compliance? Any examples around that?
Yes, but not. I don't have a New Zealand example, but I've got an Australian example. So there's a case study you can get out there for Suncorp Bank, who basically went through whole workforce workplace transformation. Completely turned upside down. It was after the Brisbane floods. They started scratching their heads and trying to figure out why they needed to be in the middle of Brisbane, bringing hundreds or thousands of people into the city centre each day. Decided that they didn't, and most of these people were driving past branches that would have spare desks and whatever it is, so they decided that we don't really care where people work, or we shouldn't care where people work, and they enabled the technology on the back end, and as part of that, BYO became prevalent to them. Right. So if you have a look at citrix.com and just do a search on Suncorp as a case study, then that's there. There are probably more as well, probably more specifically over in the States and in Europe. But that's the one that I actually know of on the top of my head.
Great, thank you. Hey, thanks guys. Please join me in thanking our speakers for today. Cheers guys, appreciate that. Hey, so thanks for your attendance. It's been awesome to have you here. Just want to say thank you for attending Forward Web. I hope you've enjoyed this morning. Please do fill out the surveys so we can improve these sessions and meet your business needs. One of the questions that came in actually from the chat as well was, is the content going to be available online? So yes, we've got the YouTube video going up in several days' time, and the slides will also be available on our website. So if you want to know any more about Modern Workspace, have a chat to your client manager. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Thank you very much.